Last night, a committee of 4 men and 1 very confused dog gathered under the pretense of a Super Bowl party. Things got out of hand quickly. We talked about football so much that at one point we were dangerously close to stepping on Nick's Tears territory. A line that should never, ever be crossed. The committee was split right down the middle on Seahawks versus Patriots, but I'm pleased to report that sanity prevailed, and most importantly, the Patriots didn't win. After vibing to Bad Bunny, eating an irresponsible amount of food, and the dog entering what could only be described as a food coma, we finally refocused. And through the music, the debates, and the recovery period, we toiled and burned the midnight oil to make sure this week's Tears were ready before the midweek Premier League game. So without further ado, it's time for Anton's Tears. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Fire Them Cannons. Welcome to this week's edition of Anton's Tears. And yeah, you're going to be wondering, why is the tears black and white? Well, I made a promise to Jake, who's been on this program. We spoke about it. We had a discussion about a certain team's position, which I'll unveil, and whether or not I should consider them going down if they're to lose a particular fixture. We're going to get into that in just a second, just to keep you guys interested and keep the suspense going, while I tell you to make sure you're hitting the like button and make sure you're subscribing to Fire Them Cannons. We've had a tremendous week since the last time I've been on the Tears in terms of new shows, lives, videos every single day. Hal has come out with, of course, the temp check. He's got another video coming out tomorrow. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. So Fire Them Cannons is really going full swing and really getting notoriety. There are people everywhere now telling me, good stuff, that they hear good stuff about Fire Them Cannons, which people who I never even thought would even have an eye on my show, but apparently they have. So I'm very humbled with where this thing is going, and we really think that it has the potential to go really, really big, and that can only be good for the community. So make sure that you're hitting the like button, subscribing, making comments, because it's only going to help push this content out to more and more people, because that's that way this channel grows, and that way, of course, we get to treat you guys all with more and more fun content, and hopefully more even good guests like we've been having recently on recent shows. But let's get back to business. Let's get back to Anton's Tears. And yes, the answer to the question, why is this background black? Well, this is for the second time this season. I'm going to be eliminating a team from the Tears. So for those of you who followed me on when this show was on Hotsport, which is still collaborating with Hotsport as we know it, that we eliminated Wolves in late December, right? I think just before Christmas, I think. It was actually right before Arsenal played Wolves in the Premier League, which was a bit of a gamble on my part, but in the end, we made it through. But the second time, it has now come up where the committee has decided that one team is going to get eliminated. The second team will be eliminated from the Tears, and that team is Burnley. And yes, I did speak to Jake, and Jake questioned, and by the way, he also commented in the comments section that why was Burnley not in the bottom tier to begin with, and why were Burnley not eliminated? And I said, look, that game against West Ham, where West Ham obviously is the team that is in 18th place in the league, if Burnley can't beat West Ham at home and be still stuck on 15 points, and West Ham obviously win that big 6-pointer, it would be very, very hard for me to see Burnley staying up in the league or making an argument to think that they will stay up in the league. And I've come to the conclusion that this team, just like Wolves, his fate is going to be going down. So yes, they have now been eliminated from Anton's Tears. And now go into, that side category with Wolves. So now we only have one spot remaining in the elimination category. One that I think is going to go and rumble down to the wire. We've got a few candidates here, and I'm going to list them off one by one. And we're going to start off with who I believe to be is the elimination favorite at this point, and that is Nottingham Forest. This goes by many different metrics. A lot of people will be like, what, Nottingham Forest? Wouldn't it be West Ham? Like, Nottingham Forest are currently not in the relegation zone. In fact, they're 3 points clear of it. But I think losing to Leeds, a promoted team, away from home, and of course, I think many people have done it better. Teams than Nottingham Forest have lost it to Leeds away from home. But for it to be so convincing, it almost seems to me like Leeds separated themselves from Nottingham Forest in this conversation. Not only that, I feel like the team above them in the tiers, West Ham, which I'll just might as well bring, has been on better form. And yes, this tier is called the Final Rose. Now this is, of course, comes from, for anybody who watches The Bachelor. Obviously, The Bachelor gives out roses, every round, and whoever doesn't receive a rose gets, eliminated from the show. So we only have one more rose to give out, and because I believe 16 of the teams have received roses so far. I'd say for me, like in terms of probably being safe in the league. And it's going to be, I reckon, about a few candidates here that are going to be, for me, candidates to, to be eliminated and be that last elimination team. But I don't think, it will be something that becomes apparent quite quickly, in my opinion. Like, I think that it's going to take a while, for like, there's a lot of twists and turns, just like in the title race, when it comes to this relegation race. And I think it might be someone that goes down that surprises us. But at the moment, I do feel now of course, West Ham play Man United. That's going to be a tough one. Nottingham Forest. Let's check the Premier League fixtures quite quickly for this week's games. Crazy because these things come thick and fast. I don't do enough prep work for these shows as I normally do. Nottingham Forest play Wolves at home. So again, this is a big week in terms of Forest maybe being able to kind of stretch that lead again, and maybe the tiers might flip-flop again. But from right now, based on the form of West Ham, based on, I believe, the schedule remaining, so West Ham have the 10th hardest schedule. So their schedule basically is very balanced from here on out. So they'll be exactly the same moving forward. The 10th hardest and the 10th easiest, they're right in the middle. But Nottingham Forest have had the 17th hardest schedule, which means they will have the top 4 most difficult schedule remaining in the second half of the year, which again, a 3-point lead is very small for that much of a difference in schedule difficulty, which is why at the moment I do give West Ham the edge. Next up, safe for now. So this is the other candidate that I have, outside shot, but a candidate that I have for going down realistically. And it's mainly just because, they were a team that was promoted from the league, and their overall talent actually isn't as good as West Ham or Nottingham Forest. I'm going to be interested to see how that pans out. But one thing that Leeds have in their favor is, to date, they have played the second toughest schedule in the league. By the way, they had a big win against Forest, which kind of puts them in a really safe spot, which I say safe for now. They're in a good zone right now. If they can just be somewhat consistent with what they pick up, obviously, when your Leeds, I'm not having the high expectation of consistency as a team that's challenging for the title or for top 4 should have. But in terms of maintaining it, they just need to be able to kind of like beat the teams around them, I believe, pick up those crucial points, especially like I think beating a Forest in a 6-pointer like that was key. And the indications for me are that most likely they will probably stay up. Now, this next one's going to be tricky because for the first time I have a 7-team tier lost in the shuffle. Now, we all kind of just agree. We sat here, we had a long discussion. And we're like, it's really hard to separate all of these teams. These teams at the moment, like, in terms of week in, week out, like, we kind of like changing them around in different orders in the tiers. But the reality sit in that they're really all kind of right in that same level. They all are teams that on their day could beat anybody, but could also lose to anybody. They're all teams that have had great runs of form throughout the season and also have had terrible runs of form throughout the season. They're teams who have had great upsets, but also had very embarrassing underachievements this season. And we're coming to this point now with 13 games to go, where these teams, Brighton, Crystal Palace, Everton, Fulham, Newcastle, Sunderland, and Spurs, have to define where their season will end up in this kind of final period. Like, I've been talking about it with Terry, and he believes that there's a chance that Tottenham could go down. Maybe Tottenham is a relegation candidate. For me, honestly, I think that's a bit of a dream. As much as I would love it for banter purposes, especially, and for my hatred of Spurs. But I have to be honest that overall, I think the overall talent in comparison to all of these teams should hold them in good stead. Same should apply for Newcastle. Both of them, by the way, they're playing each other this week. So that's going to be an interesting game, specifically for the purposes of, lost in the shuffle and what direction they choose. But I do think those two teams are ultimately teams that should have the overall quality to move higher up in this shuffle, although the schedule is pretty tough, coming especially for Spurs. Yeah, and for Newcastle, actually. Newcastle for the second, that's the crazy thing. Newcastle for the second easiest schedule overall so far this year. So that's another thing. But so the road for Newcastle is tough, and so is for Tottenham. So Tottenham have had the third easiest schedule so far in the season, and their form has been bad. That's kind of why they're this slow down in the tiers as well, by the way, that the fact that they're in the bottom half of the league. For Brighton, Crystal Palace seem to have all but lost any swagger. Things seem to be going down the tubes, and they revitalized them, and they kind of gave them life. I did not expect Palace. I mean, it was a narrow win, but the Palace would go over to Brighton and get a victory. No way. So again, there's Brighton being like, okay, you should be winning this game at home against a team that's not in good form, and then dropping the ball. That kind of gives you an idea of this. Another two teams on this list were Everton and Fulham, who, we spoke about it on Upset Alert last week, that we kind of felt like, Cal felt like it would be a Fulham win. I felt like it would be a draw, and both of us were wrong because Everton won. And that's the type of games that these are. And then there's Sunderland, who, while they have had a great season and still, I believe, are amongst the 10 best teams in England, they're 9th. Are a tough team to play against. They're a pain in the ass. In the midweek. But at the end of the day, Arsenal kind of show that they are another level above Sunderland. And it was sort of like Arsenal beat a team that was a standard Premier League team, which sounds like an insult, but for Sunderland, considering this is their first season up in the Premier League, is a major compliment to give them. And I think that Sunderland not only will stay up in the Premier League this year, but I think there's a really, really good chance, that they obviously can be one of those teams that kind of stay in it for a while. I really do think that. But above them, by the way, is Bournemouth. I see you, Bournemouth. Okay, I see you. the good form continues. Me and Cal both kind of saw this coming, that it would be Aston Villa having a really tough assignment at Bournemouth. And yes, while, Morgan Rogers gave Villa the lead, Bournemouth showed some great, resiliency, some great fight back, and that stadium was really up for it and really kind of carried them. And I think that Bournemouth really probably deserved at some point, I think, to take the 3 points. Ryan, great goal to get them the equalizer, and man, that's another run to add on to the catalog of a good run from Bournemouth. And Bournemouth could also easily be in the lost in the shuffle category. But for me, I think their form has been a step above. And not to mention, by the way, that they've had the third toughest schedule so far in the league, which means in the final 13 games, their schedule is the third most favorable, obviously, because that's how it works. Next up on the list is an awkward reality. Brentford and Liverpool. Now, not for Brentford. Big ups to Brentford. Another big win away from home against what I would call a Big 8 team, in Newcastle. It was a bit of a shootout. They came from behind. Then they end up, winning at the end. Away from home at St. James's Park. That is so difficult, regardless of the form of Newcastle. Yeah, it's a calamitous for Newcastle, and we kind of already covered that a little bit. But from a Brentford point of view, they're back on a really good run, and now they have another very tough assignment when they play Arsenal. But to be honest, even as an Arsenal fan, I'm holding my breath. I'm a little bit nervous about this game upcoming. Not only because of the fact that, I was hoping City was going to die and they didn't, and the fact that they could potentially cut it to 3 points, but the fact as well that Brentford has been a very, very tough stomping ground for a lot of the big clubs and basically anybody this season. But so, Brentford really deserve overall on form. They have the same amount of points as Liverpool, so it's the tears don't lie. There's the same goal difference as Liverpool, so the tears don't lie. And Liverpool, to be honest, should really, really, really be worried about where this thing is going. Me and many Arsenal fans almost banked on the fact that we thought that Liverpool knew how crucial this game was against City in terms of determining whether they're going to be a team challenging for the top four or a team that may miss out altogether. And right now, they've got a lot of soul searching to do. Slot is under a lot of massive pressure. I think there's an assumption across many different people that he's not really the right guy, and that by the season's end, they might be looking to make a change. But right now, they're just holding on, and that the writing is on the wall. But at the same time, Liverpool showed in their little round table meeting that they have got, fully planning to have Slot around. But for them to go up the way they did, and for them to capitulate and fold in the way they did, in that moment at home against a City side that they have never lost to under Pep Guardiola at Anfield until now. This Man City team, the one that had their backs against the wall. Yeah, there are questions on Mo Salah, on whether Mo Salah is declining, questions on if Van Dijk is declining, questions on if Alisson is declining. And with all the discussion of how great this team was and how great the signings were, it's been a really, really bad year. I can't even use the term inconsistent, because I think that they have been consistently underperforming the expectations. They have not really put together a good run together. Yeah, they had a bit of an unbeaten run, but it was one of the worst unbeaten runs ever. I think they only won 4 of those 12, I think, unbeaten, which it was. 8 of them were draws. What is them? Look, so yeah, 25 games, they got 11 wins, 6 draws, 8 defeats, 14 out of 25 games. Again, they're below 500. I think I said this on a past on a past Anton's tiers. They're below 50% winning percentage in the league this season. That's disgusting for a defending champion. So it's awkward reality of a Liverpool. It's time for them to wake up. They've fallen from championship title favorites to begin the year. Then their first little wobbles, like, okay, maybe they're no longer the favorites. Then it's like, okay, well, early we're eliminating them from the title race. Okay, well, they're in a top 4 race too. Oh no, they're not even in a top 4 race. They might be in the Europa League. It has been a slow but steady decline throughout the year for Liverpool. And yeah, they've had the exact same season as Brentford, who I had at the beginning of the year as one of the teams I thought were tipped to go down. Now, I think that's got a lot to do with the fact that Brentford have been amazing, and I've underestimated them, and they've fought very valiantly this year, and they've been consistent. I mean, as consistent as Liverpool. That's a praise for Brentford. So it is an awkward reality, but it is a reality indeed. And interesting fixtures coming up for both teams. Liverpool go to Sunderland, a team that has never lost at home this year. And it's make or break time now for Liverpool. So they're going to have to do what City just did to them, which is break a home winning streak or do something that hasn't been done for this year and be the first team to beat Sunderland away from home, or else. Brentford, on the other hand, play the team right now that's at the top of the league who are on good form. Let's move on, though, speaking about that, to the teams at the top part, pushing the top part of the table. Sloppy seconds. So the reason why I call this sloppy seconds, number one, Villa officially are out of the title race. They are 9 points off of the top. Sorry, but Unai Emery is not clawing back a 9-point lead and overtaking both Arsenal and Man City to go to the top of the league and win it. So, for all intents and purposes, they're not in the title race officially from here on out for me. While a certain other team escaped that fate, Villa did not. And that draw against Bournemouth really confirmed for me that, they don't really have what happened. They have too many injuries right now. Like, eventually the wheels have fallen off, just as a certain me predicted when I called them a mirage. The other side of this coin, though, Chelsea and Man United are on 4-game winning streaks. Man United, by the way, is 1 win against West Ham tomorrow away from a United Strand haircut. Please, as I will follow up the notion that Cal said yesterday on temp check. Please, United Strand, I would love to see a live stream of the haircut. Like, I will wake up at any hour of the night, just name the time, and I will literally sit there to watch you cut your hair, because it'll be a historic moment. A must not miss moment. But first, his team needs to do the business, and it would be actually kind of funny if they stumbled at the final hurdle and he's like, no! But we will find out tomorrow. Chelsea, on the other hand, with the exception of the 2 defeats to Arsenal in the League Cup, been unbeaten under Liam Rosina. They got another outstanding victory away to Wolves in the first half hat trick from Palmer. Now, eliminated Wolves actually behave eliminated. They're almost like, what's that point beyond caring where you just don't give a fuck anymore? Is that like, what's the term? Is that like apathy or something, right? It hurts so bad that it doesn't even feel pain anymore. Wolves are at that point like this, like, I don't give a shit. The way that they play, like the 2 pounces they give away to João Pedro were actually a joke. Like, in terms of completely unnecessary, completely rash, completely filled with emotion. Weird. But that being said, I'm not going to discredit Chelsea or Cole Palmer, who, by the way, music to the ears of Chelsea fans to see Palmer score a hat trick. Now, they have Leeds, at home, which they lost to Leeds. Yes, they did lose to Leeds in the league away from home, but I think at Stamford Bridge, I expect them to go ahead and make it 5 in a row. And United, I expect them to do the similar things. And beat West Ham away from home. And United's trainer will get his haircut. Villa play Brighton. That's still a tricky one, interestingly enough. But the reason why I call this tier sloppy seconds is because I feel like they are going to be in the top 4 race as a drop-off from City and Arsenal. Like, they are so far out of the title race for me. Even Villa, who are 3 points behind Man City, so to speak, I think there's a gulf here. So they're almost going to be like in the Champions League places for me by default. And I do also think, by the way, that there has been a gap between them and, crazily enough to say, Liverpool. So at the moment, Liverpool are 6, 4 points behind Chelsea, and 5 points behind Man United. And it's sort of like stuck in like a little bit of a void between the shit show that is Liverpool and then the upstart Brentford Bees, and then of course the title race, which is now what we are going to discuss. Let's discuss our title race tiers. And yes, there's still one, despite me hoping there will not be. And now it's time to kind of list them in order. First, we have the title underdog, Manchester City. And yes, the title race is still on. But I don't believe it's as on as everybody would like to make it feel like. Yes, by the way, great win. Backed against the corner, wounded animal. They would do what any animal does in self-defense when you're trying to kill an animal. Can you imagine? Like, I don't even want to bring up these things, but you can imagine like trying to like choke or kill an animal to death. They're going to get very, very angry, and they're going to bite back purely out of instinct in self-defense. And right at that moment when you feel like, okay, I'm about to kill this animal, which, by the way, I don't even want to discuss. I don't even know why I brought this analogy up, because the imagery in my head, like, I don't like it, but I gotta stick to it. But like, if that was your intention, which I do not under any circumstance promote that type of behavior. I'm a dog owner. I love my dog. I would never even think about doing that stuff to animals. But of course, there are people who do that as a profession, but I'm getting way off topic and I'm backtracking at this point. But yeah, animals, I don't want to say dogs, but animals will defend themselves when they feel the most vulnerable. At this point, it was a do or die moment. They were 1-0 down in the game. The clock was ticking. We were heading into 80th minutes or so. And they did what they did to stay alive. They thought, I think it was Haaland who finds Bernardo Silva with a cross header by Szoboszlai. What are you? Are you daydreaming? Because how the hell did you keep Bernardo offside? That is standard Premier League defending. You just like ball watching. Crazy. You should just be getting yourself in a position to catch, Bernardo offside. But regardless, they get back to 1-1. I'm like, okay, fine, 1-1. And then all hell breaks loose. Obviously, they give Alisson. They reward a penalty to City from a tackle from Alisson, on Mateus Nunes. They give a penalty, and Haaland puts it away, and they save their season, celebrating it like intensely. Which, by the way, I think it's great scenes, great for football, to be honest. But I just feel like, if Arsenal in that position, we wouldn't be, promoted for celebrating what scenes. It'd be like, get down the tunnel. How shameless, celebrating when you're still 6 points behind is what if we were in that position, people would have said. Even when we're 6 points ahead, they would, regardless. For me right now, it keeps City in the title race. It might reinvigorate them. We'll have to see. But I do think that Arsenal at the moment, as long as they take care of business, should go ahead and still win the league and be the title favorite at this point. I just want to talk about both of them at the same time. Arsenal, I thought, did exactly what I called upon them to do, which was knowing that Liverpool game was going to be happening the next day, which, didn't turn out that way in the end. go put yourself 9 points clear and put yourself in that position to be able to take advantage of it. And at the end of the day, that's what we did, and in convincing fashion in the end. And it wasn't like Sunderland were an easy team to play against. As I said, they were dogged. They were tough. They did everything hard for Arsenal. They had these tactics that they felt they could lean on. But at the end of the day, Arsenal, found a moment of brilliance from Zubimendi. And Victor Gyökeres is alive, people. 6 goals in 8 games. 8 GA in 8 games for Victor Gyökeres. And it is a scary times right now. So, yeah, while people can look at that Man City game and try to write as many narratives as possible. By the way, it was a very important win. I can't on one side say, hey, you know what? If they lose, it's over. And then diminish the fact that they won. I will not by any circumstance. But I still do kind of feel like, regardless if it's Liverpool or not, if it's a different sort of opponent, and they lose or draw and Arsenal win, same scenario. In fact, we're even closer to the end of that point. So I do kind of still feel like this thing is in the balance. I think it's up to Arsenal. If Arsenal want to make it a race, we will drop points. If not, we just keep doing the business. You have to sort of just forget about the pressure that people are going to try to put you under and just keep taking care of Arsenal without worrying about Man City. Everybody's trying to make this about Man City right now. And if you're as a Man City fan, that's exactly what you want, which is to stay alive in this thing as long as possible and hope that Arsenal make a mistake. But we have been here before in the December period, and that ended not so well for Man City. So lots to go through. Interesting. I guess my take on the Premier League might be different than many on the scenario. Everybody kind of likes to jump on the emotion and the narrative behind it, having a title race and all that type of stuff. But for me, I'm not like that. I look at it like I've always looked at it, which is, all right, they survived for now. The title race is still on for now. And we will just, go about it week by week and kind of reassess it, as we move on. 13 games to go now in the Premier League. More midweek fixtures. Man City play Fulham at the Etihad, and Arsenal go to Brentford. So those fixtures probably work a little bit in Man City's favor in terms of City playing a home game against one of the teams in the shuffle versus Arsenal going to a place where a lot of people struggle. Going to be very intriguing once again, as it always is, and it will continue to be intriguing as we move on closer and closer to that finish line. Guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below about my tiers. What do you think about Burnley being eliminated? I know Jake is going to have something to say. What do you think about, my take on the title race? What do you think about the shuffle? Do you think that was a good call? What do you think about, me having Forest as an elimination favorite over West Ham, who, by the way, I had as elimination favorite a week ago, ahead of Burnley, who I eventually eliminated. So very interesting. You can see how the tiers can change from week to week based on how things go on. A lot of things change in football over a couple of days even. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. There will not be an upset alert or a under pressure this week, given the fact that the games came so damn quick. And then, by the way, you have FA Cup at the midweek. So when will we be back with those shows? Most likely when? Arsenal's going to play Wolves in the middle of the week, but then kind of maybe leading up to next week, we'll kind of build it back up again. But again, Arsenal's going to be playing Wolves in the middle of that, which, of course, for us on this network means a lot. So I'll be interested to see how I balance that. But anyway, guys, enjoy these games. Very intriguing to see what's going to happen on these games. Let me know what you guys think, by the way. Do you think that City will close the gap this week? Do you think we'll maintain it at 6? Or do you think that maybe we'll get in this midweek what we thought we might have gotten on the weekend, which is Arsenal really kind of getting a stranglehold of this title? again, the Premier League, the drama that is the Premier League, continues week in, week out. Thanks everybody for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next video. Anton out.